You don't just remember what happened, you remember what made you who you are. Not always intentionally, but emotionally, because the brain isn't trying to preserve facts. It's trying to preserve sense, the kind that keeps your emotional story consistent. If your identity says, "I'm the one people forget," you won't just remember a missed call or a late reply. You'll sharpen the moment no one texted back, and blur the time your friend stayed on the line for an hour the week before. You'll replay the birthday where nobody showed up, and forget that your aunt stayed late, or that your dad called you from deployment just to hear your voice. Those parts don't fit the story, so they fade. Not because they didn't happen, but because they don't reinforce the emotional logic your brain is protecting. That's the core insight here. The brain doesn't prioritize accuracy, it prioritizes identity continuity. It asks one question: does this memory match the version of me I've had to be? If the answer is yes, it stays sharp. If the answer is no, it fades, even if it was good, even if it was real. You know, your nervous system doesn't really sort memories by importance, it sorts them by repetition and emotional weight. And, well, what gets repeated most isn't always what hurt the most, it's actually what fits the version of you you've been rehearsing the longest. If your self-image is "I'm not heard," then even the small moments get filtered through that lens. Like when someone cuts you off in a conversation, your brain flags it. Not just as rude, but as proof. Proof that your voice doesn't matter. Even if, just minutes earlier, that same person praised your work, the praise doesn't stick around, because you see, it doesn't support the emotional version of the story. This isn't lying to yourself, it's your nervous system doing what it was wired to do. Keep you consistent. It's a protection mechanism. It's trying to save you from chaos, from contradiction, from having to rewrite the logic that helped you survive. That's why memories aren't accurate. They're strategic, they're emotional pattern keepers. If this is resonating, then not just in your head but in your body, hit the like button, and subscribe if you want more content that doesn't just describe psychology, but breaks the emotional systems beneath it. The past isn't just behind you, it's being constantly reshaped to serve the identity you're still trying to protect. At some point, growth stops feeling exciting and starts feeling like betrayal. Not because you're scared of changing, but because changing means something worse. You'd have to rewrite the version of you that made the pain make sense. If you've built your identity around being left behind, then someone staying won't feel safe. It will feel suspicious, unreal, wrong. Because now your system has to ask, if this is possible, if connection is possible, then what were all those years of rejection for? What were you holding on to? That's when people start to sabotage. Not because they're afraid of happiness, but because happiness breaks the emotional timeline they've depended on. It threatens the version of you who protected yourself by never expecting too much. The version who earned love, who prepared for loss, who made peace with being misunderstood. And here's the hardest part. That version doesn't die easily, because it still believes it's the reason you made it this far. You don't have to forget the story, you don't even have to stop telling it, but you do have to stop using it as proof of who you still are. That's the shift. Not erasing the past, but letting it take its place in the timeline, instead of keeping it on repeat as emotional evidence. Because the memory isn't the problem. The problem is the role it's reinforcing. You remember being overlooked. And it justifies why you don't open up now. You remember being dismissed. And it proves you should keep shrinking. You remember being used, and it supports the idea that value only comes when you perform. But what if the version of you who needed that protection doesn't need to drive anymore? What if they could stop working? What if you could thank them, and then relieve them? Not destroy them, just stop giving them the microphone. Because you're not tired from what happened. You're tired from how hard you're still working to prove that it mattered the way you said it did. It mattered. But maybe it doesn't need to define you anymore. You're not betraying yourself by letting go. You're just updating the pattern your nervous system has been clinging to for too long. Let the story stand, but stop letting it run the show. What's one memory you keep revisiting? Not because it still hurts, but because it keeps justifying the version of you that feels safest. Write it down. Not to get rid of it, just to name what it's still trying to prove. Then ask yourself, do you still need it? This isn't therapy or advice, it's reflection. You don't have to erase your history, but you don't have to keep living inside the same chapter either.